Today we're going to talk about the peripheral nervous system. Okay, the peripheral nervous system is the parts that exclude the spinal cord and the brain. So the nerves in the peripheral nervous system connect the eyes, ears, other organs, blood vessels, and muscles to the central nervous system. The peripheral nerves include the cranial nerves, spinal nerves and roots, and the autonomic nerves. The autonomic nerves influence the function of the internal organs. Some examples are the respiratory rate, the heart rate, digestion, and pupillar response. The autonomic nerves are the mechanisms in charge of the fight or flight response. The endings of the sensory nerve cells are either tonic or phasic receptors. The phasic respond quickly to stimuli while the tonic responds slowly over time. While the tonic receptors have a constant rate of impulses, the phasics have a high rate of impulses that decrease quickly. So the phasic allow our bodies to ignore some stimuli. These include odor, touch, and temperatures. So which stimuli do you think it is if you sit in a hot bath and you get used to the heat or the temperature? Would it be the phasic? Okay, now we're going to talk about vision. Emmetropia is what we consider the normal condition of 20/20 eyesight. It requires no correction. So you may hear this term if you order sunglasses and they say that there's no correction or that there's not a prescription for the lenses. It's merely the normal refractive condition of the eye where the light will focus accurately on the retina. Myopia is nearsightedness, which means you can see near or up close. Medically, the images come into focus in front of the retina. Myopia is corrected with glasses that have concave lenses. A concave lens is wider at the edges than in the middle. This spreads the light out more evenly. The retina, because of the shape of the eye, is an abnormal length. Objects in the distance are not seen clearly, so myopia needs a lens to induce hyperoptic defocus. And hyperopia is farsightedness, and the images focus behind the retina. This makes images better for distance objects than up-close objects. In glasses, a convex lens is prescribed, and it's wider in the middle, and this adds better focusing. So hyperopia needs a lens to induce myopic defocus. So when you look at the slide, B will actually match with the lens for E, and C will match with the lens for D. LASIK is a treatment used for myopia, hyperopia, and astigmatism by reshaping the cornea with laser surgery. So refractive eye surgeries also include LASIK, photorefractive keratotomy, which is shortened to PRK, and cataract removal. Okay, let's look at the photoreceptors and the transduction. So the specialized cells in the retina and the back of the eye that respond to light are called photoreceptors. These are your rods and your cones. If you walk into a dark room, the cones in the retina are working and the rods are not activated yet. The cones need light to work properly. The rods do not need as much light, but it takes 7 to 10 minutes for the rods to take over the cones. Once in the dark, the rods do work, but they don't provide any color information. So when you leave a dark room, things look brighter because the rods are saturated and they stop working in these bright conditions. So things will seem bright for a few minutes. Then the cones begin to function again and you can see normally. The ocular photoreceptors are the neurons for phototransduction. The outer layer in the retina contains the photoreceptors. The ganglion and bipolar cells are in front of the photoreceptors to reduce the acuity as the light travels through the axons and the cell bodies of other neurons. The center of the retina is the fovea, and this is where you have high visual acuity. The blind spot is where the axons go through the retina at the back of the eye to the brain. A photoreceptor releases neurotransmitters when it's stimulated by a light source. ATP provided by the inner segments of the sodium-potassium pump. Photoreceptors are neurons that do not conduct action potentials. So you can see that sodium-potassium pump if you look at the diagram. The first example of a rod shows that the channel is open, and then in the light, it shows that it is closed. The sodium-potassium pump is closed. Okay, the pathway for sound transduction and pitch discrimination. Sound waves will enter the outer ear and hit the eardrum, making vibrations. The eardrum is connected to the malleus, which is known as the hammer. The hammer vibrates to the next connections, which are the incus and the stapes, and the stapes will push the oval window in and out, transferring the vibration to the cochlea. And the cochlea is the fluid structure that resembles a snail. There are small hair cells that translate fluid vibrations that go along the nerves to the brain. So the fibers near the cochlear apex vibrate the lower frequencies, while the fibers near the oval window vibrate the higher frequencies. The vestibular apparatus. This is the system of semicircular canals, auricle and saccule in the inner ear, lying within the temporal bone that provides the functions of hearing and balance. You'll also notice when you see children aren't developed as much that you can see a difference in their vestibular system than the adults, because it does impact the growth of the ocular motor responses, body awareness, spatial perception, attention memory, and balance. Pardon me. The autonomic nervous system is a complex set of neurons that facilitate homeostasis without conscious involvement. Cells of the autonomic nervous system affect their activity locally as well as facilitate deviations to the metabolic state of an organism. So the autonomic nervous system sustains blood pressure, it controls the rate of breathing, it influences digestion, urination, and modulates sexual arousement. The autonomic nervous system is divided into the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. The parasympathetic is what we call our rest and digest, and the sympathetic is where we had talked about the fight or the flight. So the sympathetic nervous system is a division of the autonomic nervous system. The sympathetic portion regulates body processes without effort, or you might say automatically. This division is part of the fight or flight response of the body. The heart rate increases, and the force of the heart contractions causes the airways to open to make breathing easier. It releases energy stored in the liver. The sympathetic nervous system is also responsible for performing body functions while you rest. The basal metabolic rate, muscle strength, sweaty palms, and it will decrease things like digestion in an emergency. It controls the release of semen and ejaculation. The parasympathetic nervous system is a second subdivision of the autonomic nervous system. The parasympathetic works automatically without conscious effort to regulate body processes. The parasympathetic regulates, conserves, and restores during ordinary processes of the body. That's the key word there, during ordinary processes of the body. Examples would be your heart rate, blood pressure, digestive tract, eliminating waste, just to name a few. The parasympathetic is also responsible for controlling erections. The receptors of the autonomic nervous system. Acetylcholine acts on central and peripheral nervous systems. The autonomic nervous system exerts its actions through two antagonist branches, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. So if we look at the diagram on the slide, we can see that both the sympathetic and the parasympathetic branches are controlled at the preganglionic level by the neurotransmitter acetylcholine. This molecule binds nicotinic receptors at the autonomic ganglia to trigger the release of norepinephrine. If it's a sympathetic synapse, it is stimulated, or acetylcholine that binds to tissue muscarinic receptors, which will produce a parasympathetic or a cholinergic response. So the Muscarinic receptors bind both the acetylcholine and the muscarine, an alkaloid present in certain poisonous mushrooms. If you're wondering where this got its name, it was first isolated in Amanita muscaria. So, cholinergic transmission, acetylcholine mediated, that activates muscarinic receptors occurs mainly at an autonomic ganglia, organs inverted by the parasympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system and in the central nervous system. The nicotinic receptors, unlike the muscarinic receptors, which are G-protein coupled receptors, nicotinic receptors are ligand-gated ion channels, which bound to acetylcholine. These receptors undergo a conformational change that allows the entry of sodium ions, resulting in the depolarization of the effector cells. Adrenergic receptors refer to adrenaline. We used to call this epinephrine. So the stimulation of the adrenal medulla by the sympathetic nervous system causes the release of epinephrine and norepinephrine into the bloodstream. Epinephrine is a hormone, while norepinephrine is a hormone and a neurotransmitter. So there are two receptors, the alpha and the beta. Okay, now let's look at the neuromuscular junction. It is a synapse of the motor neuron and the muscle fiber. It occurs between the synaptic end bulbs of the motor neuron and the motor plate of the muscle fiber. The end plate of the muscle fiber is an excitable region which is responsible for starting action potentials across the muscle. This will eventually lead to a muscle contraction. And now let's just look at a quick summary of the nervous system. It's divided into the central nervous system or the peripheral nervous system. We said the central nervous system consists of the brain and the spinal cord, where the peripheral nervous system is broken down into the somatic and the autonomic systems. The autonomic breaks down into the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. This is a list of all the works that were cited. Thank you.